On this episode of Outsider Information, we're going to get a little personal and talk about the root of insecurities, how and why they manifest, and why it's important to confront them in your quest for peace in your professional working environment. Welcome back to Outsider Information. I'm Brandon, and I'm excited for this episode because it is personal. And when you do talk about something that's deeply personal, you want to try to do it some justice. So open up a little bit, share a little bit about my working life, some of the insecurities that have evolved over time, and how not to let them manifest in your world, and really just how to confront them. I think that's pretty important when we're talking about any perceived deficiency. You want to be able to confront that thing head on, because that's going to be how you're going to grow. Not just that particular weakness, that perceived weakness, but be at peace if it's something that others are always going to think about you. So on that, drink of the episode, green tea matcha latte. Find the recipe in the description, and let's go. So I want to just say, first and foremost, I'm not a mental health professional, so when I speak on some of this stuff, I'm going to try to be pretty broad. When I use any examples that are not personal, it will be commonly known fact, or I'll state that it's an opinion. Most importantly, I don't speak on behalf of anybody, especially the Black community. I am a member of the Black community. We are a monolith, but all of our experiences are unique, and one does not diminish the other, one does not raise the other up. Collectively, our experiences are our own, and that gets lost a lot of the time. So wanted to put that out there, and that's out of the way. So what is it exactly that I want to discuss? At 30 years old, I've done a lot, I've seen a lot, and I've experienced a lot, both in my general and my working life. And I'm fortunate because I've had the access and the ability to see and be around many different people, cultures, and environments that have really allowed me to fully be at peace with myself and exactly what I am. But getting to that point, it took a lot of actual work. It's not easy because it takes a real conscious effort to acknowledge what makes you feel insecure, what gives you anxiety, and mostly, despite those things, what are you exactly? So there's a lot to go into, but I'll start with how I grew up. I'm not going to be telling you a sad story with that. I grew up in Colorado Springs, single mother, comfortable middle class, and because I start my story here, there's really nothing unique about it. There are lots of single-parent homes of all races. So I find it comical that it was assumed that because it was just my mom and I, that there was some kind of a struggle. Let me be the first to tell you, there was not at all. We lived very well, and because of her job as a flight attendant, we got to travel the world a lot, and I did so from a very young age, and I take pride in that, and I still take pride in it, because the perception that there would be some issue that I was raised by a single mother is very much race-based, and the thought that we should have struggled more is laughable, and it's offensive, because that was just not the case at all. But can't escape that. I'm Black. Shocker if you didn't hear that at the beginning of the episode and didn't piece together from the podcast logo or the LinkedIn profile picture, but this isn't scratch off. This skin color's here. So but that's where we want to get into where some of the insecurities lie. And it has nothing to do with me being Black. I'm just going to say that right then and there too. But there are some insecurities and things that are bred based off of the environment that you find yourself in. And it is definitely tied to my racial background. And that is not uncommon with many individuals in the Black community with some of the messaging that comes towards us. I can dive more into that personally, but inherently there is a disadvantage to being Black in America. This isn't something that I'm even going to debate. So if you take exception with that statement or would like to challenge it, please, and I say this as disrespectfully as possible, F off, because there is no argument to be had here. So just turn this episode off. But because of how and where I grew up, it was a predominantly white environment. I went to a really great school district. My grandparents lived in the Broadmoor area. If you want to look that up in Colorado Springs, please do. But I'm saying this because the two don't often match up. And when they do, it creates a culture clash mainly because of the white individuals and how they interact with their black counterparts. It's very rare that that dynamic is flipped. From an early age, I recognized this dynamic, and I knew I was different, and the kids did as well. The microaggressions and treatment that you experience as a child just come across as mean, unfair, and it makes you sad because it doesn't make you feel very good. But you don't process that in the moment as racialized transactions and interactions. Now, as you grow up and you look back on some of those experiences as an adult, you begin to say out loud, wow, that all makes sense. And then you do something like this and you talk about it on a podcast. One of the examples that really pops off my head, and I've got a few of them in a couple of different stages of my life, was in the fourth grade. There was a kid that was in my fourth grade class, and whenever he got less than an A on anything, he would just start crying because his parents would get him in trouble or something like that. Not my place to say what is or isn't important, but I'm going somewhere with that. Every single time, though. And I didn't care. Like, it wasn't my thing. Did I think it was weird? Yeah, maybe. I wasn't the greatest student, but okay, it is what it is. I thought that was odd that every time you would cry because you didn't get an A. But didn't care. Didn't really affect me. But later in that same school year, same interaction with the same teacher that we had, I was in the band. And I lost my mouthpiece for my instrument. I was a tuba player. So we have that giant hunk of metal as a mouthpiece. And shocker, right? You lose your mouthpiece, something that you need for class. And if you don't have it, people are going to be upset with you as a fourth grader. I started crying because I was worried and freaked out. Also, it cost money. And just because we weren't broke doesn't mean that we were just throwing money around. I felt bad. I was afraid that I was going to be in trouble for losing my mouthpiece. And I started crying. Mind you, I rarely cried as a kid, but the same teacher who would constantly coddle or pat that student on the back who cried after they didn't get an A saw that I was upset and told me to be more grown up about this. And she said it in front of the whole class and then walked away. Was there an intentional racialized moment there? I would say no, but was there dismissiveness and implicit bias that played a role? I would say yes, and that's something that's all too common when it is directed at people of color. Case in point, black women seeking health care, or especially when giving birth. Giving birth puts every woman at risk, but inherent bias puts black women at significantly higher risk because of some pseudoscience out there that thinks that black women have a higher pain tolerance. It's awful, but I'm not going to get fully off track here and jump into that wormhole. But again, there's this inherent dismissiveness that comes with people of color. Specifically, I can say on behalf of the black community that what we feel, what we think, what we need often gets dismissed in a white power structure. But that is where some of this stuff begins to breed these inherent insecurities because it starts from a very young age. You just don't know how to process it at the time. So, okay, we advance into junior high, where our entire district combines into one monolith, right? Back to how I grew up. Didn't grow up in an uncomfortable way. Nice clothes. Grew up with what was our version of our culture, right? Always had my style, but it was introduced to the cruel concept when we got around a bunch of other kids, white kids, of not being black enough. Now, looking back, it's funny that I let a bunch of white kids assess my blackness, but in the 7th grade, we all want to be accepted, so I tried to black it up a little bit, right? Because what I was hearing in my head from people was, you're not cool enough, you don't represent what we think is cool enough, and you need to change. Now, how damaging of that is to the psyche of someone to not just be told, you're not cool, but that thing you are, you're not that either. You need to be more what we think it should be. And I was incapable of it because you can't act black. You either are or you aren't. And as a 30-year-old, that's a simple thought. But again, as a 7th grader, it's hurtful because you begin questioning your whole existence because everyone wants validation for who they are. It's a lot of why we have a lot of things socially the way we have now. People being more cognizant of pronouns, different sexual orientations, ways that we identify. And whether you agree or disagree, it's rooted in people wanting to be validated and accepted for who they are. Another example, I mean, I have plenty of examples of teachers who pulled stunts, but there's always one that sticks with you. And my PE teacher, a person who I really liked as a 7th and 8th grader, clearly they were the most qualified person to tell me this, but in front of the class, I don't know what it is about doing things in front of people. Completely unvarnished, he said, you know, I worry about you when you go to high school. I feel like you're going to have too much freedom. Really? Okay, the kid who's never been in trouble, maybe outside of getting a few lectures from some teachers, I've never forgotten that. And things like that fuel me because even then it pissed me off. Thinking about it now, it still is one of those things like it's a primary motivator for why I'm doing a lot of the stuff that I'm doing. Because when you hear something like that said to you, they're tearing your value down, not just to you, but again, in front of other people that, yeah, we don't think that you're going to be successful at X, Y, or Z. And for no reason, and he never provided a reason, just, I think you're going to have trouble having this much freedom. Which again, white teachers saying that to a black student, there's some racialized undertones here. And it keeps progressing and building it up. But that being said, if I think back, I've never had a black person as a teacher or a professor that was not a substitute, at least not one that I can remember. So if I did and you're listening to this, I am sorry for forgetting, but this highlights a problem. I'm black. I'm 1 month away from finishing my doctorate, and I can't remember a single black instructor. And I've been in school pretty much, 60% of my life. So yeah, that's a problem. And something that, again, is indicative of a lot of the issues that a lot of people of color, in my case, the black community, have, is that lack of representation delays our ability to really forge and find our identity because all of the people that we have to interact with are not people that look like us in positions of power. So anyway, there was high school, and that's when kids got a little bit more bold with stuff, and suddenly saying the N-word was cool. That's nigger, or I'm sorry, nigga, if they wanted to be cool about it. They said both. And I definitely got called the former. And because I went to a rich school full of white kids, they felt like saying the latter would make them cool because nothing says struggle like a white millionaire's kid dapping each other up, calling each other nigga in the process. It's a sight to behold. And I saw it daily, and looking back again, the fact that I didn't get in any fights or throw a punch, I'm impressed by my own self-restraint, and it has set me up to where I'm able to do some of this stuff now. But this is all real, and I could intently call everybody out, everybody who did it. I remember doing it, and some of those people I still have communications with to this day. Notice communication, not necessarily friendship, but I do remember a lot of traumatic moments that were rooted in this environment, especially in high school. And I have one seared into my mind in particular. In the 9th grade, I left class, asked to go to the nurse, and I didn't go. And I called my mom crying because I wanted to transfer schools because of how overtly racist the kids in this school district were. And it was just getting worse and worse. And every single day I was in high school, honestly, even my friends, and I put that in air quotes, I did not like them. I kept most of them around because it was better than being alone. But in the moment, I genuinely despised the people I went to school with because of a lot of those things. I knew what racism was. I knew many of them said racist things. And this isn't the bigoted, discriminatory, or just ignorant stuff, blatantly racist things. Every time I was told to be blacker, that I wasn't as smart, it was like tearing a sheet of paper that eventually is going to rip completely. But this is the state of survival myself and others in my community often have to live through. If we are outnumbered and we don't have it, we kind of just have to take it. And the few other pieces of salvation and saviorship that we could have around us, if we see somebody else in our community, are often so busy surviving themselves that we can't link up and create some form of unity. And I felt that with the other black kids that were in the district too. Like they had theirs. They were accepted potentially by the structure that was in place. And there really wasn't a way to be open up and be vulnerable in that capacity because they were just trying to survive themselves. They knew what worked for them. And why would they compromise that in any way? I don't blame them. I probably would have done the same thing in high school, the way that I kept people around that I probably shouldn't have. When you're in survival mode, you just try to survive. But what else? High school was great. I had a teacher accuse me of having a bomb in my locker. That was fun. I had a girl spit on me. Lots of examples, but in the moment you just move on and move forward. But this is really where all that insecurity breeds, and it can become crippling because, again, we want to be accepted and validated for who we are. We just want to blend in, and this is the case especially being black. So often you feel boxed in yet isolated at the same time, and anyone who says they haven't felt this in the black community, I'd be stunned and honestly question their awareness to their environment. I joke at work that my goal is to get through the day without incident, but in every joke there's some truth. And I say that statement for my life too. And it was no more evident than it was in high school. I just wanted to get through the day without incident and not have to choke one of these kids out, because there were some days where it was absolutely tempting to do so. But life moves on. And I was always, from a young age, the type of person to push back. But once I hit my limit, there were some ways that it imploded in some negative ways. And that's what happens when you kind of build things up. But when I finally started to push back more in college, right? You're 18, you're kind of out and about. It was a much darker way of doing so, right? You get out of the environment that's caused you a ton of trauma. You're kind of out in the real world. And your interactions with people are significantly sharper. They're more hostile, even to people who may not be a target for some of that stuff that you didn't like in the past. You closed your emotions off, at least I did, because it was easier. In a lot of ways, this transition is responsible for a lot of my demeanor now, albeit I'm significantly more aware of it, and how I come across is more of a conscious decision than it is just out of reflex. But in the moment, it felt like opposite ends of the extreme. I felt liberated to be out of an environment that was very traumatic, but the way that I acted a lot of the times was very alienating. And when you continue to find yourself in environments where they're predominantly white, that doesn't work either. And I ended up moving to the whitest of the white in Iowa, the great, put that in quotes, that state actually kind of sucks, state of Iowa. I had a roommate, the first roommates that I'd really ever had outside of just living at home. And within 2 days of meeting him, we were just sitting on the couch, that feeling around period, getting to know somebody. And he turned and looked me directly in the eye and asked, "Is it cool if we say the N-word around here?" And it's one of those moments where like the computer just restarts, because I've seen people be racist or see what boundaries that they can push based off of your reaction. I've never had somebody ask me if they can say a racial slur and if it's okay. Like, I tell that story to people and they give the same look that I had in the moment, which is just like, the words, I obviously right now I'm having an issue coming up with words for it. Anyway, my response to it was just, "Is it cool if I react if you do?" And then we just kind of looked at each other for a second, and he never brought it up again. Nothing more needed to be said, but it showed me the environment that I was going to be in, and the environment that you're always going to be in might change, but the way you're viewed by others, it probably will not. Anyway, I didn't enjoy my undergrad experience because in Iowa, I felt both like a commodity or an exotic prize and a discardable asset. Even getting the chance to be around others in the black community, I even ran into a new dynamic of, I'm willing to suppress you to keep myself elevated by the white power structure I've worked myself into, or you're not black enough for us either, which honestly, figuring out both of those things wasn't as much of a defeat as it was clarity that I needed to decide that maybe the only way I'm going to be happy is to be myself. And around 2017, that is when that work began. As an aside, black folks, if you find yourself in a white inner circle, you're only as useful as their cause needs you to be. And at some point, you're not going to be needed by them. And you're going to need the black community once again. So don't burn those bridges, because honestly, the black community, we don't forget. We remember, All right. So if you plan on throwing us under the bus to forward yourself, don't expect good energy if you try to come back after you realize the transgression of your ways. So that is the personal side. What about professionally? I think it's much more important to be competent than liked. I don't ever want to be accused of not doing my job, which is why I get triggered into fight or flight when somebody does. If I'm not good at something, that skill can be developed. If I'm not doing something, suddenly it makes me look less competent, and whoever is in charge, it gives them a reason to start looking for other stuff. Displaying the knowledge and doing the job may not love my personality, but nobody can ever say that I'm not putting in the work. And to me, that is important because you need to be able to come back at people when they give you some of those micro transgressions or you notice the inequity in the environment that you're in and you can point it out. That is your best weapon, is to have what you're doing, be able to show what you're doing. And then when it comes back to you that they don't think you're doing it, you've got the receipts that say otherwise. It's a really not a great reality, but this is working in an environment that is predominantly white. Now, when in white spaces, my goal isn't just to succeed at the job. It's to make it so that the next young black professional that applies to this space, they're able to say, you know what? It worked with Brandon. We're going to do this again. When you're in spaces like this as a black person, this is the mindset. At least it's certainly my mindset. I'm not interested so much in my opportunity. I don't want to ruin the next opportunity for the next person in my position, because that to me is setting us back. And I do not want to be responsible for setting my community back in any way. Now, unfortunately, the spaces that I've worked in, few and far between, have had color, let alone anyone really in the black community. And you become very aware of how you're going to come across in most environments. My biggest asset is because I've worked in a lot of different types of populations, communities, I can go back and forth. Like I said, you don't have to act black. You can act black. You either are or you aren't. So my special power is being comfortable in spaces that others might be very uncomfortable with. And that code switching is a major bonus because I can do my job anywhere, right? You're the ones that are going to have to be uncomfortable with it. I'm good. So what does that create? That core level, right at the beginning, you just want to be accepted. And I hold true to that even as an adult. I want to be wanted, but for what I bring to the table as a person and professionally. Again, adept at code switching, but that's more of a survival technique rather than a practice I want to perform daily. Based off my background, never really had the easiest job search, and that's not really a racial piece, but my background is very different. Then they put two and two together, and you get somebody on an interview, talk to them on the phone, look them up on LinkedIn, you see, oh wow, person of color. Let's see what this is going to be. And when I have interviews, the interviewer realizes very quickly I'm not just another candidate. And I don't say that arrogantly, although I have been called that by a few interviewers. But think about it. 30 years old, black. I've already worked a 10-year career. I'm about a month, 2 months away from having a doctorate finish. My responses are genuine and authentic, and I have actual results to back my claims up. You hear all those things, it's like, yeah, I'd sign up for that. I could prop myself up all day long, honestly. If you want to just listen to me talk about how great I am, I could do that. But when you find yourself in position talking to certain people that despite the credentials, you come across as a threat because they take your representation the wrong way. I've got something potentially that they don't. In this case, it's most certainly going to be a doctorate. So how does somebody take that, right? How does somebody take that when they're trying to assess whether or not they like you or not? Full disclosure, white men are not my biggest endorsers. I am typically myself and myself only, and I don't placate. If we're having a conversation, that's a moment to display what I know. And I'm not going to hesitate to challenge somebody or say something to somebody who might be spewing false information. But of course, if you do that, who is this uppity Negro not to agree with me? White women, y'all make me uncomfortable. Now, I married one, but don't worry, she's one of the good ones. But if I'm picking between the two, white man, white woman, I'll take the white woman as a supervisor or somebody that I'd rather communicate with. Because at the minimum, if you're a woman in leadership, you likely had to work there rather than just get it through nepotism. But I've got issues with the white woman demographic as well because of how fetishized and how awkward the professional relationship can be. So I honestly don't really love communicating with either if I can avoid it, but professionally, kind of have to. I just keep my distance. It's a weird split. You've got overt racism or the passive kind, socially ignorant versus the socially indifferent. Both of these dynamics, I'm very careful to be authentic, but comfortable out of necessity. I don't expect anyone to know it. My culture is. I expect them to be responsive and respectful to it. Yes, I'm black. No, you don't need me to be the face of whatever trophy of diversity you're trying to win. And my biggest fear in the workplace is being that thing you can point to because you want to appear less racist. You know, the quote or the number. I have this fear specifically now with the degree that I'm earning. Is somebody hiring me because they want somebody with my expertise to move things forward in the particular area that I am an expert in? Or is this going to be a $100,000 diversity initiative to say we've got a prominent black individual in leadership and this makes our organization appear very inclusive and welcoming and we can use this as a champion point? Yeah, not interested. So in every work environment I've been in, it's always been great when I start. And when I just share thoughts and just talk about certain things, it's always awesome and insightful and they're great ideas. By the way, I hate when the stuff that I say gets dismissed as ideas. I don't pitch ideas. I pitch proven methods of practice that you can implement. So that's the difference there. But the moment that I begin to display that expertise or push back, it turns from suddenly, that's nice, or those are great ideas, to who does he think he is to know better than us? That's kind of what the doctorate says, but again, do you. But there's a constantly demeaning vibe in many of these environments I've been in. And at times it even bled out into my relationship with my wife. I'm not going to go into names here either, but she did specifically tell me 3 people that I know very well, one of which is actually in the family that I'm married into, and get to swap holiday talk with them. And I constantly pretend like I don't know what she said to my wife behind my back. And it's a great time. But anyway, wife, she is currently in PA school. But before that, she was a pharmacist. So making close to actually over 6 figures, right? Pharmacy pays very well. But that I was, the thought was that I was moving out to Minnesota just because she was going to be able to pay for my rent. This was a direct quote, by the way. This was told to her by 3 people that I know, one of which is in the family that I'm married into, that maybe I'm only coming out here not because I truly love my wife and we're trying to build a life together, but because I wasn't making a lot of money out east and I needed a place to live. So that was the clear rationale. Obviously, she didn't listen. But when I heard that, I took it very offensively because that's got significant racial overtones. What they were saying is, are you sure you want to live with this black guy who's not making a ton of money? Mind you, before moving here, I had just been given a national award for coaching. But it's things like that that are all the more motivating to be the absolute best. Again, I'm a month away from my doctorate being finished, and I got a list. I have a list of people that I got some I told you so's to hand back out to, or at least passively. All right, I can play the game a little bit. But I'm petty, and I love nothing more than tying up the game, taking a lead, and then running the score up until I feel like I made my point and I can drop the mic and walk off the field. These experiences, they go, again, all too common in the lives and especially people in the black community. You're too loud, too black, you're not black enough, you intimidate people, you're a little too intense. It would be better if that topic wasn't brought up here. What you're talking about makes me uncomfortable. Example after example after example. There's a reason I avoid the whites like I do. Y'all are problematic, and you tend to invade cultures rather than embrace them. So anytime there's a clash to the image you've built to the culture that's in front of you, it causes you to lose your ability to function, and it creates a really uncomfortable environment for those of us who honestly just want to feel secure in our presence alone and just get through the day without incident. So what it took for me to get to the point that I'm at now was a honest conversation with myself and really what I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to be good at my job rather than just universally liked. The idea of liking my way to success seemed like it sold my community out, and I'm just unwilling to do that. And I won't dive too deep into my feelings there, but I've got other opinions on that. But I wanted to also credential myself to a point to where if somebody disagreed, it certainly wasn't going to be because of fact. It was going to be purely opinion, and the doctorate will allow me to do that. I will be able to swing that thing around and tell people blatantly that what they're saying is rooted in no fact. And I'm looking forward to that moment, because then I'm going to probably get a chance to see what true hatred and bigotry looks like. And just seeing it up close and personal from people like that, when that's what they have to resort to, when they feel like they've been proven wrong or humiliated like that, that's the ultimate win. The ultimate win is triggering somebody into doing something along those lines, because not only does it reveal who exactly they are, but it's the ultimate loss, because now that's all they are. And that's a good thing to have just in your pocket, to know that that is what people are hiding under the surface when they see somebody of color, of competence, who can actually not just do the job, but back it up in every single way. But my message is going to always be about creating a path to prosperity and independence. What I hate about so many people, especially in their respective communities that may have some struggles, is once they've made success, the message is, well, I made it, so you should make it too. Just come up here with me. That's not really how it works. In my community, in the Black community, I feel like the message should be, I'm here. I want you to get here with me because there's plenty of room, and you want to help them get that way up. I'm a lot of things, good and bad, but I'm certainly not a liar, and I don't play politics, and I'm very comfortable being uncomfortable. But these are decisions that I made because when I do have the success that I want to be able to say I did it the way that was best representative of myself, that I didn't trip anyone else on the way to the finish line, and most importantly, I want to be able to tell my kids or anybody that asks for my time that you can be yourself and you can get what you want if you're intentional about doing so. All right, thanks for the time. This was one of those that I did want to do because for a while I've just been kind of sitting on this, thinking about how I wanted to frame it, but I think this was the right way to do it. Provide some insight to the mindset and do it some justice. And I felt like I did that here. So as always, check out what we've got. Other links on Versify, the LinkedIn, the Medium, and of course the podcast that we've got here on Spotify. Thanks. See you next time.